Hi everyone, my name's Dahlia. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to share with you all the books that I read in December. So in December I read 4 books. Actually one was an audiobook, so one of them I listened to it. And that's actually the first book that I'm going to talk about because that's the first one I read in December, and it was Days of Blood and Starlight by Laini Taylor. Since I read it on audiobook, I clearly wouldn't have the physical edition of it, but basically, it's the second book of the Daughter and Smoke and Bone trilogy by Laini Taylor. And this trilogy follows a young girl named Karu. And it's basically, I don't know how to explain the series because like the first book is kind of like different from the second two, I would say, because I'm currently listening to the third one. But in the first book, Karu is an art student in Prague, and she does errands for these beast-like creatures basically, and they're called chimera, and they're the ones who raised her, but you know, her normal part of her life is being an art student. And so on these errands she collects teeth for Brimstone, who's the chimera she does the errands for, and then one day the portals to which she goes and visits the chimeras are burned away, and so she is stuck not knowing what to do, and at the same time is discovering who she really is because it's been a secret to her basically entire life, and then discovers that, or rediscovers that, there is a war between the chimera and the seraphim, which are basically angels. And so yeah, that's what this trilogy is kind of centering around. So the second book I really enjoyed. I don't know if I enjoyed it more than the first book. I think I liked them both equally, even though they were both completely different. I mean, it still follows like the same story, but like it just took off in a completely different direction than I was expecting, but like in a good way. It was really good, and even though I would say like the emotions and the feelings that and everything that Karu was going through was a lot darker in the second book, I was still really invested in the story. And yeah, I think the first book I would say like kind of had like an insta love, which kind of put me off, and that's why I gave the first book a 4 out of 5 stars. But the second book, there wasn't as much romance, and it wasn't like focused on the romance. It was more focused on like the war and stuff that was going on between the chimera and the seraphim, and Karu's part and role in the war. And so yeah, and just a warning I want to give about this book before you pick up this trilogy. In the second book, there is an encounter that may disturb or trigger some people, in which a character is sexually abused, and so I just wanted to give that warning in case you were thinking about picking that up. But yeah, overall, I think I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, so I would think I'd bump it up to like a 4.15 maybe, because I think it was mostly invested in, the story was more about like the characters and not super like plot driven. And yeah, one thing I also want to say about Laini Taylor is her writing is so beautiful, which I absolutely love. Just the way she describes things, just like at times she does take a little too long describing some things, and so it kind of like slows down the story. If you've read this, maybe you know what I'm talking about. But yeah, that's just another thing I wanted to throw out. Then the next book that I read in December was The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, and this is the first book in the Stormlight Archive series, and I actually reviewed this, so I could leave the link down to my video to my if you want to watch it. I mean, and it's actually a long video, but I tried to discuss as much as I could about this book because, as you can see, it's a huge book. So yeah, I'll try not to spend a lot of time like talking about it right now. Basically, it's about, it centers around a war between two groups of people, the Parshendai and Alethkar, which is a nation, or a kingdom, I don't know what it is, an empire, whatever. And it has 4 main characters, and each main character like plays a different role in the war, except I would say for one, well, she kind of, I don't know, it's kind of confusing to talk about like very quickly because it's just, there's just so much going on, and there's a huge cast of characters. But One thing I do want to say is that if you love high fantasy, I would definitely recommend picking this up because Brandon Sanderson is excellent at world building, at character building, at like he just handles high fantasy so well. And if you are intimidated by books of these sizes or even high fantasy as a genre itself, I would say Brandon Sanderson is a good author to pick up because he kind of just flushes out the world like for you. He explains everything, but also leaves you with questions about the story itself and leaves the reader very intrigued, and he invests in each and every character, whether they're minor or, you know, a main character, and he's just really good writer. So yeah, he's also the author of the Mistborn trilogy if you've read those. And if you like the Mistborn trilogy, I would recommend this too. So yeah. The next book that I picked up in December was The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time Legendary Edition manga, and story and art is by Akira Himikawa. I'm sorry if I butchered that. If you know how to pronounce that properly, could you please tell me below? This is how you spell it. Yeah, but this is a manga version of the famous game, The Ocarina of Time and the Legend of Zelda series. And when I saw this in Barnes and Nobles, I absolutely fell in love with it. Like, I leafed through it and I read some parts. And it's basically the video game in a story manga format. And I just loved this. And I gave it a 4 or 5 stars on Goodreads. I forget what, but it stuck true to the original storyline of the game, and if you're a fan of the Legend of Zelda series, I highly recommend picking this manga up. It's just such a great read. It was a fast read. I read it in 2 sittings, and I say 2 because I was trying to like take my time with it and slow down because I was just flying through this. It was so good. Basically, The Ocarina of Time is a story about Link, who is a young hero who lives in the Kokiri forest, and there's this evil king from the desert who is threatening to take over Hyrule, and so he has to step up and become the hero of time to save the land. And so it goes through his entire adventure, and being the hero of time also means like that there's an element of like time travel, as in not like the traditional kind of time travel, but like it jumps into the future because things happen that lead to him needing to be an adult to fight off the evil king. And so that aspect is also very interesting. So even if you haven't played the games, I do recommend picking this up because it's just a good story in general, especially if you're not really into video games, which I'm not. The only exception I have is Legend of Zelda, which I did play on Nintendo 64 and the 3DS. But yeah, it's a great story. And then the last book that I have to talk about is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. This is a book that I also reviewed, and so I could leave that down in my channel, down in the description box below. But it's about a girl named Agnieszka who is from this valley, and this valley has been kind of like at war, I would say, with this force called the Wood. It's like this evil forest that is on like the edges of this valley, and it threatens to basically destroy this valley in different ways. It has corruption, it has like evil creatures and things like that, and the dragon is a wizard who lives in a tower in this valley, and he is the one who protects the citizens of this valley from the Wood's harm. But in return, a girl must be sent up to live with him every 10 years, for 10 years, and so, I'm pretty sure you can guess that she's the one who is selected to live with the dragon for 10 years, and this is about the events that happen after that. And so, yeah, it was a very good story. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, and it actually pleasantly surprised me. It's kind of like a Beauty and the Beast kind of a story, if you like that kind of storyline. But yeah, it's a good read. One thing I would say is the romance is weird, like kind of like you would expect the romance, but at the same time you don't. Like, I didn't understand what was going on in that aspect of the story. But yeah, good read. And so those are all the books that I read in December, just 4 books, which is like not so much as you would expect, especially since I was like off from school during that time, but The Way of Kings did take up like half of my December reading that, but it was worth it. And yeah, so I hope you enjoyed that video. If you have any thoughts or comments about the books that I just mentioned, feel free to leave it down below. And yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a very good day.